Here I'm going to replace an outer tie rod end. This car had been making a pretty loud clunking noise when you turn the wheel a little bit, and I figured something was wrong with one of the tie rod ends. And you can see the play in this joint. Just from me, and I'm not even moving it that much, obviously the joint where it goes into the tie rod end is damaged. The boot obviously is ripped. I started taking the cotter pin out, that's why it's all the way out like that, but I wanted to show you the process of removing it and getting that changed. I think that's the main reason my car was making that big clunky noise. Every time I would spin the wheel a little bit, this would be what caused that noise. First thing you're gonna do, you're gonna wanna loosen this nut off. I already loosened mine a little bit. It is, if you don't have it, it's a 22mm wrench. Fits on there perfect. The reason I loosen it now is because if you take the joint out, when you spin it, the inner tie rod is going to spin as well, and it's going to lose position. I'm doing this so I don't need to get the car aligned. I can spin the new tie rod on just the exact same point and then just tighten it right back up. So you're going to want to loosen up that nut first. Next, you want to get off your cotter pin and get off this nut also. After you have the nut removed, I have a ball joint separator tool, which I put on there, and then I crank the ratchet, and it pushes the ball joint portion out. It's a lot easier to get out. You can see before, whoever had done this, they were hammering at this piece which attached to the knuckle, and there's a bunch of little nicks in there. I just don't think it's great for the rack itself, all that banging on it and pushing on the inner and outer tie rods. So I use a ball joint separator. I already separated it, and then pull the tie rod right out. Now when you're removing it, spin it, make sure your nut stays in the same spot. There you go. And you don't want the inner tie rod to spin either, that way you can lose position. So I'm basically going to spin it all the way off, and I want to take a look at this tie rod end. And it's still in the same position. Yeah, you can, I don't know if you can see it in there. Let me just tear this off. This thing is, I'm not gonna use it anymore anyway. You can see the play. It moves back and forth. Not necessarily side to side, mainly back and forth. Towards the inner and outer part of the car, not towards the front and back. So that's why this one was making all that noise. It's relatively loose too, and I would hate for this to break while it was on the car. That's why I'm going ahead and changing it now. This is the new tie rod end I'm using. Picked it up at AutoZone, $20. And it's the exact same length. Let me lay it down compared to the old one. It's the exact same length as the old one, so it should be perfect if I put it on and then tighten up the lock nut. I shouldn't really have to mess with the alignment. Granted, I would like to get the car aligned eventually, but right now there's a lot of suspension work that needs fixing on this car, and I'll take care of a lot of those bushings and everything else first before I get it aligned. I just wanted to make sure the car was still drivable, keeping it as close to the original alignment as possible. Here we're just going to put it on, spin it back on to the original position as the old one. It should almost line up perfectly. Set up against the nut, the locking nut that is. Maybe one more twist. That's perfect. And then just tighten it a little bit like it was when I pulled off the original one. Go ahead and slide it back into place. Oh, make sure the boot's not really bent all weird. There we go. Put your nut on, and then put your cotter pin back through, and when you're finished with that, go ahead and tighten up the locking nut. And you're finished with replacing the outer tie rod.